Live to Harare now.
Kirshni, thanks very much indeed. Well, yes, the governing party, which has just won the two-thirds majority, 68.6% of the National Assembly votes. They were holding their press conference just a short while ago. And watching this with me is political scientist and director of the Leaders for Africa Network, Richard Mahomva, who joins me now. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the program. First of all, your reaction to what you heard from the representative of the ruling party?
We are seeing a proposition towards peace from the ruling party, which is a reciprocation to violence, and it's quite reflective of a situation whereby there is cordiality that is being purported, even in a context of a superficial, tense atmosphere that is being projected to demonize the electoral process and the establishment, as it were.
I suppose it's easy to be cordial when you feel that you've won both the National Assembly, and it sounded like he is quite confident that they'd won the presidential race as well.
Beyond that point, I think we need to look at the call for peace and requests for peace that are coming from the establishment as a mature initiative to say we need to progress towards peace at all costs, no matter how much violence is pitched, whether in victory or not in victory. Peace is still essential because the democratic trust of our country and the provisions of our constitution should ensure the liberty of the individual, and that the security of the individual is a priority of state interests.
All right, take us through where we are now. We saw President Robert Mugabe ousted or resigned or coup d'etat, whatever you want to call it, in November last year. The current president has been at pains to say it's a new order, a new regime, a new way. Has he been able to convince the voters of that? And what's your take on what you've seen?
Basing on the election outcomes, it's quite clear that the MPs who have voted in favor of ZANU-PF are a clear indication of the fact that the new dispensation has been a sellable discourse. He has been a marketable political discourse in this wide market of political ideas, contestations, convergences and divergences, against the background, of course, of split patriotic national consciousness. So the fact that we are seeing even a possibility of a ZANU-PF victory, it's quite indicating that the new dispensation has created a plural political culture, and we actually saw with the extent to which the media was liberated. We actually saw with the extent to which the opposition penetrated into the rural spaces which were formerly strongholds of the establishment. And clearly that speaks to a transformed political culture which is magnetic as far as political participation of all citizens is concerned.
If President Mnangagwa wins this election, would he be wise to bring in other faces from other parties? He's got a two-thirds majority. He's working in the parliament, so he doesn't need to. He's got the overwhelming support of the country. But for the sake of peace, healing wounds, might it be useful to bring in the Chamizas of this world?
If people have got skills, the skills must be brought to the fore in the interest of national priorities. If people have got the skills, we need to see a situation whereby there's an apolitical distribution of, public administration duties and all of that. So we need to transcend the narrow incline of the distributions of power. And clearly with the aspect of devolution that has been put onto the fore in the manifesto of the ruling, it is quite clear that as we decentralize power, we decentralize it on the basis of ensuring that everyone who qualifies to work in the interest of the Republic gets a job. And I'm sure that's a rational path that needs to be taken beyond the inclines of the political paradigm and the partisan paradigm, to be precise.
At least 3 people died yesterday. How do the political parties manage this situation?
First and foremost, political parties must not incite violence. And this comes against a background of the opposition inciting violence, inciting euphoria for an outcome that has not been formally announced, and inciting a passion for despondency, systematic despondency, which can be traced from the statements even of the Youth League president. And in Gweru, there were pronouncements that we need to mobilize to celebrate if the election is in our favor. We might also need to mobilize if the outcome of the election is not in our favor. So there's been systematic despondency that needs to be crushed. But at the same time, we find out that after calling for people to go onto the street to die for their cause, they are not even taking responsibility for that. As such, it is the mandate of the state to ensure that these unorganized demonstrations as pitched by the opposition do not occur, just for the simple reason of ensuring that the human security is not threatened by the ego and the narcissism of political parties.
But the reality is innocent people got caught up in the crossfire. We have a mother, 40-year-old mother, who got caught up, a security guard who was beaten up, who was just doing his job, and people being shot in the back. These are not part of the political machinery.
What we are actually saying is that the loss of life is regrettable at all costs. No human life should be lost at whatever cost. But however, what we also need to be cognizant of is we have an emotional attachment to the disaster that occurred. We also need to apply the aspect of administrative logic. Yet the state not preempted the outbursts of violence. We're actually going to even have a bigger death toll, because remember, these protesters wanted to penetrate and pierce right through into the main election command center because they thought it was justified to effect violence on those that they think are inclined to the establishment. So just imagine the amount of violence that would have occurred and how many deaths would have just happened at the HICC alone. Simply because there is a feeling that everyone else that is in there is in favor of ZEC and ZANU-PF. But remember, there are tourists that are not even interested in what we are doing as a country. And those people are obviously going probably to be harmed. So I think what the state did, while at least we regret violence, but it was a preemptive measure to a bigger catastrophe.
But the observers are saying that excessive force and also the use of the army was unnecessary.
Well, we would always not departed the same point of appreciating issues. But the fact that there was a massive security threat that was even going to result in escalated numbers of deaths, really we should be happy that at least there were the perpetrators of violence who instigated the violence did not become successful, because if they had been successful, really the situation was going to be even more nastier than what it is as it stands. But above it all, no human life should be lost in the interests of political egos.
All right. Perhaps in conclusion, I suppose there is an expectation that the presidential results may be announced today. Give us a sense of what is likely to play out and the scenarios ahead with a result of a win either way.
Basing on the credibility of this election, the nation is going to celebrate. But basing on propositions of wanting to demonize the credibility of this election, there might be demonstrations that might try to neutralize the reality of the national euphoria. Because at the end of the day, you would recall that Harare has been an orbit of resistance to what the systems of public administration have envisaged according to constitutional mandates. Harare has always been an orbit of convenience for projecting sectorial interests that seem to polarize Zimbabwe and project Zimbabwe as a space that is not democratic. But I see the nation that voted for ZANU-PF responding in a cordial manner, and that is guaranteed. Because yet these concerns which have been raised, been genuine, would see violence escalating all over the country. Yet the concerns that have been raised which led to the pandemonium of yesterday, been genuine, the forerunners of the violence would not be in hiding. The forerunners of this violence would have at least written a solidarity statement to show that they are concerned about the lives that were lost at the behest of their call for provocations of the state, which of course was preempted.
All right, so that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts and your insights.
My pleasure, and thanks for the engagement.
All right, so we've been talking to Richard Mahomva, who's a political scientist with the Leaders of Africa Network, sharing his thoughts and his opinion on the events that have been taking place, particularly in the last 24 hours, where we saw the protests descending into, I suppose, violence that saw 3 people die, and that number could be much higher when the final tally is tallied up. But we're now waiting for the ZEC, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, that is expected at around 5 o'clock to give us an indication of when the presidential results may be announced. Harare is eerily quiet today. It feels very much like a Sunday morning, and that's because the police yesterday said if you don't have to come to work, don't, stay at home, and most people have heeded that call. We'll give you another update in the next hour.
Thank you, Peter. That was our senior news anchor there, Peter Ndoro, live from Harare. A really garnering comment from political analysts on the post-electoral violence that we saw play out in the capital city yesterday. He, of course, is at the ZANU-PF press conference this hour.